Okay, this week's Sky Cricket podcast comes the morning after A-level results. And myself and Nas both had young ladies receiving their results yesterday. They seem to have survived the melee. Nas, we might not go into too much detail about what they got, but yours is heading up to your old uni, Durham. So well done to Layla. And mine's following her brother and heading up to Leeds. There's a bit of a sore head in our household because mine rolled in rather late last night. I suspect yours did too.
Same here. I've not seen mine. I was out in the town myself last night. I've not seen mine. She's usually awake by now. So never mind them surviving the melee. It was like it was me surviving it yesterday morning or whatever. So yeah, she's going to Durham. Yours is going to Leeds.
And
Get
then they're
rid of
off
them,
the
mate.
books almost, which is even better
Exactly. Yeah.
news.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great news. Although I've got the other two back now, so it's give with one hand, take with the other. So yeah, that's done. Off to Durham she goes, and Leeds, as you know, very, very good university. So well done to the pair of them.
Yeah. And we've not chatted on this podcast at least 10 days because of the very sad news about our mate Thorpe. We were going to do a podcast a week last Monday, and then we found out the day before. So neither of us could really bring ourselves to do a podcast, but we have paid tribute, obviously, both of us in print and on air, and we will be paying a full tribute in Manchester on Wednesday. So the Manchester Test match starts Wednesday. That'll be the first Test match since Thorpe's passing. So I know we're going to do a full and proper tribute on the morning of that game on our broadcast. But I thought we might just start with a final reflection or a final memory. I know that, small crumb of comfort though it may be, that all the former teammates and friends and the wider cricket community paying the kind of tributes that they paid have brought some comfort to the family. But I thought we might just, since we knew him so well and for so long, we might just kind of have a final reflection or a memory, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many out there. It'd be very difficult to put your finger on. I guess off the field, it's more general of just being in his room, playing with. It makes you sound really sad, the pair of us, but playing with our bat handles and putting tape around our bat handles, and more about us and talking than the bat handles. Actually, I sort of reflect on that time we had in each other's room. Was not so much about the bats, but actually the mental side of the game and talking about the game, and that sort of friendship you have over a glass of wine in his room and chatting just nonsense at times. So that was off the field. That they were my most special memories, just being in his room and having a chat. I'd say on the field, he was there. We were both there for our key moments, but I'd say Edgbaston 97, the big partnership. He got 138, I got a double against Australia. With the likes of Warner, McGrath in the opposition. They were still a great side, and your one-day side had beaten them, and we had beaten them in that game. And for once, it just felt like, okay, we're doing well against Australia, and you got your best mate at the other end, and batting seemed okay that week, and it always seemed okay, actually, for me when Graham was at the other end, because you knew me, I was such a complicated cricketer, and I needed someone at the other end to calm me down. And Thorpe always did that. He always did that. I just felt so comfortable in his company, whether it be in the middle or in his room, as I say. What about for you? What are your special memories of the little
Um,
genius?
of cricketing, I'd take somewhere in the Caribbean, just because if I think back to the Test cricket that we played, the Caribbean tours almost encapsulate for me what the cricket in our era was about. Very strong kind of fast bowling from the West Indies, great tours with lots of support, both West Indian support and English support, and trying to kind of battle away through that. So whether it was the 46 all out of Trinidad, which ended on that evening actually with Thorpe, didn't it? Getting bowled by Ambrose. I remember his
Sorry to
eyes.
interrupt you, but that was one of the great. Him walking off that
I know.
evening. He didn't even look back at all. He just
No.
staring into the distance. Really summed up where we were that day. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, that stays with me, and that's the kind of that's a memory of not having come out on top, if you like, but it almost encapsulated some of the great cricket that we were involved in. And then a tour that I didn't go on, I'd finished by this stage, but when we got 100 in Barbados in that game you played, and I don't think anybody else got more than 17 or 20. So that was a kind of winning, triumphant memory, if you like. But off the field, I'd just go back right to the start, to our very first tour. Myself and Thorpe were on that A tour to Zimbabwe and Kenya. And actually, somebody sent me a photo the other day. As you know, I don't keep any memorabilia in my house at all, but I know I've got this photo somewhere, and a former teammate sent me the photo of when we were all at Vic Falls in that tour. With a couple of older guys, Mark Nicholas and Derek Pringle, but essentially just a bunch of young players, and everybody just looked so happy and tanned. And those early tours, you don't really know very much, but it's all fresh and it's new and it's hopeful and it's all ahead of you. And I remember him being very happy on that tour, and we roomed together a lot, and spent a lot of time in Kenya and Zimbabwe. That's a long time ago, 30 odd years ago, but I suppose if I could be transported back for 5 minutes, I might go to that team photo at Vic Falls. Anyway, as I said, we're paying full tribute on Sky on Wednesday morning. I think we have an hour's build up before that test match against Sri Lanka. A lot of it will be reflecting on a terrific player and a great teammate. And I mean, let's turn our attentions a little bit to that, because a lot has happened, hasn't it, since we last talked, because of the gap. Stokes has got injured for one, and Ollie Pope will be taking over. And England have picked their team with Dan Lawrence opening and Ollie Stone back as a fast bowler. Should we talk about Stokes first of all? He's a pretty irreplaceable cricketer. I know it's an overused term, isn't it? But as far as irreplaceable goes, he's just about it.
Absolutely. I mean, you're literally having to try and pick two cricketers to get him, because especially recently, because he's got that bowling back and he's got his body back up until a few days ago. And that was the sad. Now, I was watching at home. I think you were commentating, actually. You were on commentary, weren't you? And I was watching at home, and he went for that run, and he'd been, shot in the leg at the end. And you just, Stokes does not show pain. All those balls he bowled with a dodgy leg and hobbling around, he didn't show much pain. He showed pain that day walking off Old Trafford, and you just knew that this is him gone for the rest of the summer. I didn't need a scan to tell me that when Stokes is walking off like that, and he punched his leg, then his thigh, and that was not frustration about the pain. That was a frustration about all the work he'd put in to get back to bowling, to get back to being a genuine, full all-rounder. And here he was again,
I
injured.
guess in a way, given his fitness record, it's a surprise that, he hasn't missed a game captaining yet. Obviously, Pope has been the designated vice captain, but has not had to do it other than the odd warm-up game and maybe the odd, half an hour or something in a test. But he's been ever present since the start of Bazball.
But mainly as a batter, hobbling around with the ball. But so listen, it is, and I think with the selection and this regime, I don't think they want to look back. Like even with the opening combination, they didn't really want to go back to Lees or Jennings or someone. They're constantly looking forward, and the all rounders, maybe someone like Sam Curran, who's in great form in the 100, which we'll come on to, but that would maybe they're looking at a backward step. So they've kept it pretty simple. Would you agree with that? And that they just move everyone up one, and Smith can bat a bit higher and Woakes can bat a bit higher, and maybe Ollie Stone. We don't know the side. We're a few days out, but do you agree with that? I mean, there are younger ones. I noticed in the Lions game, the lad Casey Aldridge, I think that's someone they may be keeping an eye on for the future. That sort of Bashir selection, they do left field selections as opposed to, I will go back to someone who's having a really good summer.
Yeah, it's definitely with selections, they're looking at like the high ceiling. They're looking at potential. So in white ball cricket, I'm sure somebody like Bethel, for example, is right on their radar, even though if you actually look at the numbers, they're not spectacular, but they just see what can be in a player. And in terms of the selection, in terms of Lawrence to opening, I think when we spoke to Ben Stokes at Edgbaston actually last week, came over just before that game where he pulled his hamstring. He basically said, look, when Crawley's fit, Crawley's going to come back. So they almost don't want to overcomplicate it, because if you pick a new young opener who does really well, then that might overcomplicate things. But clearly Crawley's going to come back. But it is an opportunity for Dan Lawrence. I mean, we old timers like me talk about opening being a specialist position, but they're not interested in that. Dan Lawrence, who's essentially a middle order dasher, is going to get an opportunity. And if you said to Dan Lawrence, would you prefer to be sat on the sidelines or would you prefer to have a crack opening? Then clearly, having travelled around for the last 12 or 18 months, really just carrying drinks and not having played, he's going to try and grab that opportunity with both hands.
I think Jordan Cox is a good selection, actually. It's someone I've seen grow up, actually, as a cricketer, because he plays at a school just up the road from here, played at a school, Felsted School. And my boys used to play against him, and he smashed my boys all over the place. And and then he went to Kent.
Well, he must be good then.
Exactly. So I followed him ever since, and he is a really confident cricketer. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a really nice. He backs his ability, and he's got a lot of ability. And he's come to Essex now, and he's had a very good start the season before he had that appendix issue. But I think he absolutely fits the bill, absolutely, in his confidence, the style, the swagger. Obviously, a keeping option for future tours or whatever, if they need a second or even third keeper, because there's so many options. I think he is absolutely a very, very good selection. I don't know how much of him you've seen, but he fits the bill perfectly.
Seen a fair bit, actually, and I remember from years back seeing him play at a local school here. I can't remember what the game was for, whether it was a representative game. It was a kind of schoolboy game, but he stood out in terms of his talent and just playing the kind of shots that, of course, all the modern batters play in terms of scoops and ramps. So a very, very talented guy. And as you say, clearly got another string to his bow, and somebody they've had an eye on for a year or so now.
And Pope?
Yeah, Pope's, I mean, captaining, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's not as though, you've been told you're going to be England captain and therefore it's a permanent appointment, and you can kind of sit there and think, right, how do I want to take this team forward? Essentially, you're in a caretaker position. And because the team has got such an obvious style under Ben Stokes, he's really put his stamp and his mark on the team, Ollie Pope won't want to do anything to upset that or change that. So although he's going to be there for 3 tests, it's not as though it's his team. He's very much in a caretaker position. Now, in fact, I remember when, if you remember, Ben Stokes did 1 game, didn't he, as a stand-in when Joe Root was injured. Where was that? At Southampton, I think, against West Indies. And Joe gave him a slip of paper saying, do it your way. Or he left him a little note on the bench when he took over. But Stokes really didn't do it in his way in that game, because he just, it was just 1 game. So whilst you're captain and you make the decisions, it's really somebody else's team. So it's a slightly awkward position, isn't it?
It is. As you know, when I was your vice captain, it's easy being a good vice captain when you get the main job. All decisions come on. I think it's good for England that Pope does get 3 tests, just in case Ben Stokes does get injured in the future, obviously, with his injury record. They need other options. They need, in the same way that they often talk about, we don't want to get to Australia and have a bowling attack that's inexperienced and playing in their first half a dozen test matches. You don't want to get there and someone who's never hardly captained in a test match before. So it'll be a good experience for him. Your feeling with Pope is that it doesn't come as naturally. The thing with Stokes, that sort of emotional intelligence and cricketing intelligence comes very naturally to him. I see there, and I sit in the commentary box and I look down and who's England captain, which at times hasn't been the case in the last 10, 20 years, but you know who's captain, and you see him do things and you go, wow, that's a really, this guy gets cricket. This guy gets captaincy. You feel with Ollie Pope, he wears that sort of aggression, but it doesn't sit as comfortable with him as it does with someone like Stokes. Almost like he was given the vice captaincy for him, to get him out of his shell, to give him confidence. We're going to move you to number 3. We're going to give you the vice captaincy. We really believe in you, which I think was the right thing to do. But now, actually, the other side of that is, that's fine being vice captain, but now you're captain. You have to sell that belief. You have to sell yourself to the team and sell your plans, which I think he's a very popular. One thing, when you get people come in, we've had Broad or Anderson or whatever in the last few months, and it's not important, as I know, it's not important being a popular captain. But one thing's for certain, he's very liked in that dressing room. There'll not be anyone that will have a bad word to say about Ollie Pope. So I think when Ollie Pope tells them to do things and tells them to buy into things, they will absolutely do that.
Yeah, I was chatting with Brody at the last test. I can't remember whether actually on commentary or just off commentary, but Stuart said that he often changes next to Ollie Pope. He got to know him, really well in the dressing room over the last few years, and said he's a fantastic lad. And I chatted to Joe Root this week a little bit, actually, for an interview in the newspaper, and I asked him that question about, Pope often gives the impression of being a bit frenetic and a bit jumpy and nervy at the crease when he first comes in. He doesn't look calm often, but actually, Joe said his character is that he's very chilled and he's very relaxed. So the character is not always reflected in how he might appear on the outside at the start of an innings. Anyway, best wishes to him, really. It'll be a big moment for him, because, as you say, it's a very different thing when you are in the shadows as vice captain, and then when you are stepping out and making all the decisions yourself. And he's got 3 matches, so it's not just a stand-in for one game. So Sri Lanka, and one of the other things we'll be showing in the course of this test series is your doco, which you did in the winter. Tell us a little bit about that. It's a 3-parter. You went to Colombo. Did you only go to Colombo, or did you go down to Gaul as well?
Yeah, we did in the end. We did a bit in Gaul. We started in Gaul, and there was various.
How did this come about? Was it just like, can I get a freebie to Sri Lanka in the middle of winter? And
not for me.
Let's think about doing some filming as well.
No, I was there. Mahela invited me across to, I think it was 125th year anniversary of the Sinhalese Cricket Club. So where we won on that tour, that final game where Thorpe again played brilliantly. And he invited me across. And you know what our producers are like at Sky. You had it with your Shamar. Once you come up with an idea, these producers just sort of pop up and say, I'd love a little trip away. Shall we do a doco? The trip comes first, and then the doco. So my old mate Drabble gets whisper of this, and it's like, I'm coming. We'll meet in Gaul. I'm like, what is the doco? And he's like, don't worry about that. I'll see you in Gaul, sort of thing. So we got there, and then we just decided to do, this great cricketing nation, small island. It's been through so much. Been through, obviously a terrible civil war. Tsunamis. It's been through everything an island. But yet that little island has produced, and I tried to do like a list of an all-time Sri Lanka 11 with, Jayasuriya and Dilshan and Kumar and Mahela and Aravinda and Ranatunga and Murli. I could go on, Mendis and all of them, they're just unbelievable list of cricketers. And we just try to do why do they produce such great cricketers? And a lot of it comes from the schooling.
What's the answer?
System. Schools cricket out there. Yeah. Some of their big matches, and they call it the big match. You'll rock up to all their test grounds. Like I say, we landed in Gaul, and I was on the fort looking down, and there was this game going on. It was a bigger crowd than a test match, and a bigger atmosphere than a test match. And it was just 2 schools. Same at Mahela's at the Sinhalese Cricket Club. You turned up, and it was a sellout, and it was like an under-19 schools match, and the talent was phenomenal. Linda was there supporting his old school. So I think the secret is school. But then we have to work out all those names I mentioned was from a specific era, really. The Ranatunga to, maybe Angelo Matthews, who's on this tour now, is probably the end of that era. And where are they? What are they still producing, those cricketers? And what's happening with Sri Lanka cricket? So we touched on that. And obviously the women's team as well, with Chamari Atapatu and the winning of the Asia Cup, although this preceded that. But where is their women's cricket? But Sri Lanka, just a lovely place to be for a week. And just to see where their cricket's at. So we tried to get that across in the documentary, in the three-parter. The fans are still so behind their team. They love their team, but they have fallen away a little bit. And they're over here now, and they're playing a Lions game. And it's the usual what we discussed at Trent Bridge, really. That they seem a bit undercooked again, like the West Indies were.
Yeah. We'll turn our attentions to that just now. But I remember, we went, didn't we, on an England under-19 tour, which was the first time we toured together. That was way back in 1987, our first. We were both at university, first year at university. I really had to get on my hands and knees and beg my tutor to let me off. We basically missed about 5 weeks of term to go to Sri Lanka. But when you're talking about the crowds for school games, I just remember that crowd of about 20,000 we had for a one-day game. It was called the Ketarama Stadium then, way back. And we had about 20,000 people for England under-19s against Sri Lanka under-19s, which I'd never played in front of 200 people before, never mind 20,000. So that was an eye-opener as to the strength of schoolboy cricket in Sri Lanka. But yeah, the team is over. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because we kind of get the sense sometimes that we play against teams a lot in Test cricket. Obviously, there's a limited number of international Test match teams, and sometimes you feel, God, blimey, they're here again. But actually, Sri Lanka have not been here for some time. I think it's 2016, is it, since they were last here for a Test series. So they've almost slipped under the Test match radar in England. They came in 2014, came in 2016, but not since then. And I suppose a bit like West Indies, who were our previous tourists earlier in the summer, they've slightly pivoted towards white ball cricket, haven't they? Some of their very interesting, slinger bowlers only play white ball cricket, not Test cricket. And they seem to play a lot of 2 Test match series, but not 3, which they're playing a 3-match series coming up. So it'll be interesting just to get a sense of the strength or otherwise of their Test match team. As you say, they're playing the Lions at the moment, a very young Lions side, and a bit like West Indies are on the wrong end of it as we speak, and it's not finished yet. But the sense are that they're going to have to learn, or they're going to have to get up to speed quickly by the time the Test match comes around on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some experience there in Karunaratne and Chandimal and Mendis, and they've got some, real talent with bat and ball. And their record recently, actually, in Test match cricket is pretty decent. But as we did with those stats at Trent Bridge for the West Indies, we put up the stats of sides travelling and how poor sides are travelling now, and getting one warm-up game 3-day against the Lions side, and then suddenly you've got Wood running in at you, or Atkinson or whatever. So if they can get runs, like with the West Indies, if West Indies have got a few more runs, they'd have been in the game. And coping with conditions, the bounce at Old Trafford will be different from the slow, low ones in Sri Lanka. So that experience away from home. Talking of documentaries, your man's going well, Shamar. Shamar and in Guyana. He's doing all right.
He had a quiet time after we did our thing, and then he's burst back into life on home patch at Providence. He got 5 for against South Africa. So it's good to see him back. And again, that he must have been so raw and rusty before that Test series. You come from IPL, where he's just sat on the bench for most of the IPL, and he played 1 game. And then you're sitting on the bench in the World T20, and suddenly, miss the flight over because of the hurricane. And suddenly you're thrust into a Test match at Lord's. And it's just a reminder, actually, that no matter how talented or how promising you are, you still need a a degree of proper preparation to get yourself up to speed for a test match. But it's something we've talked almost endlessly and boringly about. The schedules just do not allow it, but that then impacts upon the quality of the cricket that you see, because he then had 3 iffy test matches or 2 iffy test matches, and suddenly has burst into form against South Africa, having no doubt spent a bit of time getting up to speed. So there's no easy solution, easy answer to
That
all
test,
this.
by the
But
way, by the time this podcast goes out, that test could be
well, it'll be
over.
finished.
It could be
Absolutely.
could be a 2-dayer. But talking of weary, and you look a bit weary. How was last night? You've come from. It seemed a long day. I was in the morning, and I was catching up with a load of things because I'd done the day before, the 2 days before in the 100, and I put my monitor on, my TV on, and you were commentating on the women's game, and Elise Perry was smashing it everywhere. I must have done a million things, and I put on, and it was raining, and then I went out to a leaving do in Fleet Street, and I came back, and you were still waffling on hours later. It seemed a long day.
It was a long day. I think we were on air for over 7 hours.
How many
For a
balls
game.
for 7
Well,
hours?
we got I don't know, we got 100 and a little bit in the women's game before the rain came, and that was abandoned. And then the men's game was reduced to 25 balls a side. So we've all been there in lots of formats, actually, where the rain is teeming down. The umpires are desperate to complete the game. There's a crowd in. You don't want to call it off, but you desperately don't want somebody to be injured. And it was quite an end to a long day, really. And then I got the train back from New Street, so I got back about half midnight after the longest day of all time. But that concluded the group stages of the 100, I suppose. I'm on the B team, the eliminator.
True.
Which
Yeah,
is
I'm on the A team. I'm like the Welsh Fire in the Oval Invincibles, men and women. I've gone straight through to the final because the performance I've put in over a very long time. People have been a bit hit and miss, not consistent, like you in commentary. You've got to go through an eliminator to prove yourself.
So I am at the Oval on Saturday. The final is Sunday, and then we'll turn our attentions to the Test match. So Spirit against the Invincibles is the women's game, and the Brave and Phoenix, the men's game in the eliminators. Who do you fancy in the women's game?
I mean, who knows? In 100-ball cricket, you just need a couple to come off. I'd say the Oval Invincibles women. They in the group stages, there was a tie between them at Lords, where the Oval Invincibles should have won it, and then they sort of bottled it a bit at the end, and it ended up a tie. And there was a convincing win at home against the Spirit. So I fancy the Marizan Cup is just in the most unbelievable form. Captaincy, Lauren Winfield-Hill looks like she's finding a bit of form with the bat as well. Chamari Atapatu could, if she can just get a score, I think she will be absolutely dangerous leading up to maybe a final. So I fancy the Cup against Lanning matchup up front. Cap's got Lanning out twice with a little nip back wobble seam delivery. If that happens again, it exposes the London Spirit middle order. Deepti Sharma's in good nick, Heather Knight's in excellent nick, and they've got those 3 spinners. So it depends on the pitch at the Oval. If it's got the grass on that it's had, I may actually fancy the Invincibles. If it's a slow turner, I might actually go those 3 spinners of the London Spirit, Deepti Sharma, Charlie Dean, and Sarah Glenn. They will have a role to play, but I fancy the Invincibles. History tells you they're a better side.
I think it's going to be a pretty good forecast for a few days. Fingers crossed. In the men's game, I quite like the look of the Phoenix, actually. I was doing that game yesterday. Done them 2 or 3 times in the comp. The old theory is bowlers win tournaments, isn't it? And you look at that seam attack. Again, it depends on the conditions at the Oval. But Milne, who split his webbing but should be all right. Southey, Wood, Abbott, quite a nice attack. And then with a bit of Livingston, Moeen Ali, it's quite well balanced, and some serious strikers there. Jamie Smith, Ben Duckett, that youthful middle order of Moseley and Bethel, who are will be on England's radar. So they look a decent all-round side to me. They got through last night, needed that point or the points to get through, and I don't know. I fancy them to maybe get into the final, where Welsh Fire women will be there and the Invincibles on the Sunday. So that's at Lords. You'll be doing that one. I'm doing the Oval. And then we will.
In your article the other day, by the way, just what I needed. Not many Welsh, and not much fire.
Well, they've responded to your bar and your criticism, and they're there. The women are there anyway, not the men, of course, which is the team that you were referring to, really.
It's been a great turnaround, the women, because 2 or 3 years ago, Southern Brave are bossing everything, and the Welsh Fire, in both men and women, but in the women in particular, it was top, bottom. And that this season has been a complete flip, And last season, Welsh Fire winning
was with us yesterday, so she was absolutely full of the joys of spring. She showed me on her phone the celebrations when they found out that they were through, and she said, it's not every day you get through to a Lord's final. So
draft, that's the key in the draft, having the draft and them having the first few picks. So they have really improved their squad. And the Oval Invincibles men trying to go back to back, really. I mean, they look I know they lost. I did the game at Trent Bridge and they lost a close one where Sam Curran got taken out the attack. It was fast. That was farcical for a different reason at the end. It was like there was Curran was taken out the attack. There was an LBW review that they didn't review. Billings didn't review, and then the next ball got hit for 6. And then they were too late bowling their allotted overs or balls, so they had to bring an extra fielder in. So it was a bit of carnage at the end, but I still think the Invincibles men look a very strong side. They're through to another final. So, and as you say, weather forecast is good. Oval, I would have it the other way round, by the way. I would have Lords as an eliminator and Oval as the final. I think the Oval, for me, in the last 3 years has been the best ground sort of in-house experience for a game of cricket. But as you say, someone like Tammy Beaumont, some of the younger players will be looking for a Lord.
And then, well, we're going up to your favourite city then, Manchester, where the sun will be shining.
We're having dinner with Bumble on Thursday night. I'd exaggerate to say I'm looking forward to I'll get through Manchester. Start the Premier League season as well. It's all happening. We've got Arsenal they got Wolves at home. United will kick off with a draw or something somewhere. So it's a big weekend coming up.
Great. So good luck at Lord's Sunday. And I will see you, Tuesday. We'll get up there, no doubt, at Manchester. We look forward to the start of the Test match Wednesday, and looking forward to watching the Sri Lanka Test team. I'm looking forward to paying tribute again to our friend Graham. So that'll be on the first morning of the Test match at Sri Lanka, when we'll pay full tribute. We'll see you then.